We're going to talk about some powerful functions. Let's open the file. Go to File, Open. In Lesson 5, open the Formulas file. Excel has 355 different functions that you can use. It's amazing what you can do with Excel, but how would you ever learn them all? We have an example here that's definitely work-related, especially if you drive a car into work, because you need to buy a new car and want to figure out what the car payment's going to be. I'm going to guess you probably don't know the function, but it's very easy to find. Excel provides something called the Function Wizard. They like this feature so much that they've added it to the interface in at least a dozen different places. You'll always see it right next to the formula bar. It's the little FX there. But it also exists on the Formulas ribbon as a big button on the left-hand side. And then in each group, they have it at the bottom of the menu. So no matter where you are, you're going to be able to find the Insert Function button. We want to figure out what our car payment is, and if you have no idea how to start, the best thing to do is select the cell and hit the Insert Function button. And literally at the top of this dialog box, you type what you're trying to find. Type car payment and click Go. Excel suggests 8 functions that'll work, and the first one, PMT, the help at the bottom says calculate the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. That sounds like what we need. So we'll click OK, and you say, well, wait a second, I don't know how the payment function works. But it's beautiful. It brings up the function arguments dialog box that will walk you through the function. Now, the name of each argument appears on the left-hand side, and if the argument is in bold, it's a required argument. If the argument's not in bold, it's optional. For each argument, look at the bottom of the dialog box for help on what Excel is expecting. It says rate is the quarterly rate per period for the loan. For example, use 6% divided by 4 for quarterly payments at 6% APR. Well, we want monthly payments, so I probably want to take that rate in B3 and divide it by 12. I can just click on B3 and then type divided by 12. You actually see on the right-hand side that it does the little calculation for me that B3 divided by 12 is 0.004375. That's not particularly useful to me right now. Let's go on to the next one, N pair. What's that? Well, the help at the bottom is great. N pair is the total number of payments for the loan. Well, that's the months in B2. I'll click on the 48. Tab down to the next field, PV, present value, total amount that a series of future payments is worth now. That's kind of a fancy way to say the price of the car. Now, I've learned through trial and error that this needs to be negative because it's money that's coming out of the bank. So I'll type the minus sign and click on the price in B1. Right below the line, Excel shows me the answer for the formula. Right now, it would be $694.16. We'll click OK to accept that formula. Now, that was amazing. Without knowing the function at all, we used the Insert Function button, typed car payment, and Excel guided us right through how to do this calculation. Well, the answer's right, $694, but that may be more than you want to pay. The beautiful thing about Excel is that we can start to play what-if games. Let's say that we shoot for a lower price. Or maybe extend the months. Wow, this is still more than I want to pay for the car. I could sit here all day and put in higher and lower numbers, but really I feel like I was playing that old game on The Price is Right with Bob Barker. Well, hey, there's a great way around that, and it's been in Excel for several versions. It's called the goal seek function. The goal seek function basically allows you to back into an answer. Now, again, I hear the mathematicians out there saying, hey, wait a second. There's a way to specifically find the price that will yield a payment. And I understand that. But in many cases, backing into an answer involves algebra. And frankly, between you and me, algebra is something that should stay in high school. Let me show you how to use goal seek. We want to change the payment. We want to arrive at a new payment, so select cell B4. And then go to the data ribbon, open the What If Analysis dropdown, and choose goal seek. In the Goal Seek dialog box, we say that we want to set cell B4, that's the payment, to a certain value. Let's say I'm shooting for $495 by changing a cell. Now, in this case, I could either change the price of the car or the number of months that I'm going to pay for it. Let's try and change the price of the car. Choose cell B1 and click OK. Very quickly, Excel plays the higher or lower game, and when it gets to within a penny of our answer, it stops and shows us the spreadsheet that would generate the right answer. We'll see here that the price that it's suggesting is $23,761. In this fairly simple example, Excel will always get the answer. There are some very complex spreadsheets, though, where Excel eventually gives up and says, hey, I can't figure this out. Now, you have a choice here. You can either accept the new number by clicking OK, or you can go back to your original number by clicking Cancel. Click OK to accept it. The amazing thing about Goal Seek is that even after using Goal Seek and having the new answer, it's still a live formula. I still can continue to play what-if games, adjusting my price and the months, and seeing the new car payment. GoalSeek is a great tool that will allow you to very quickly back into an answer rather than having to use the algebra to figure it out. Let's go on to the next worksheet. Let's say this worksheet is something that someone else set up. You get the worksheet, and you have to figure out exactly how things are working. It would be really helpful if we could see all of the formulas at once, and Excel has a couple of ways to do that. The first way, if you happen to take Spanish in high school, you might remember the word piñata, P-I-N-A-T-A. Well, the N gives us an N-Y sound. Do you remember why? It's that little squiggly line, the tilde, above the N. And if you look at your keyboard on a US keyboard, right above the Tab key and below the Escape key, there's a key with two characters. The top character is a tilde, and the bottom character is a backwards accent mark called a grave. If you hold down the Control key and press the tilde key, Excel goes into Show Formulas mode. In Show Formulas mode, you're able to see every formula all at once. You'll notice that it made some of the columns wider, and if I have particularly long formulas, like here in D32, I don't get to see the whole formula, but at least I can see which cells have formulas and which cells don't. To turn off Show Formulas mode, use Control tilde again. If you can't remember Control tilde, in the Formulas tab, Excel now gives us a button called Show Formulas. It works the same as Control tilde. Either one works fine. I'll also note that if you happen to be in Europe, their keyboards there are different, and in some countries, the tilde and the grave are in different keys. It's actually the grave that makes this work. But here in the US, Control tilde is an easy way to remember. And now sometimes you'll want to see how one particular formula works. The easiest way to do that is to select the formula, so I'm in D32, and press the F2 key. Excel lights up all of the references used in that formula. You'll see the E30 in that cell is in blue, and that corresponds to cell E30 in blue. The orange E21 corresponds to the orange outline in E21. Very easy to get a visual view of where the formulas are going. Sometimes, though, you need something a little bit more permanent. I'm going to hit the Escape key to get out of Edit mode. And I'm on the Formulas tab of the ribbon. There's a group there called Formula Auditing. Most of these features have been around in several versions of Excel, but they were buried deep within the menu. Very difficult to find and very difficult to use. To see how this formula works, I'm going to click the Trace Precedence button. Excel draws in arrows showing all of the cells that are used to calculate this cell. Now there's a gotcha. You have to watch out just to the left of the active cell if you get this icon. That icon means that there's at least one reference that's on another worksheet or in another workbook. Now, I learned a cool trick in one of my power seminars recently. Someone raised their hand, and they said if you could double-click that dot at the corner of the icon, Excel will show you all of the other cells on other sheets. It's really hard to get to that dot. Let me try it. Perfect. So it's the dot at the lower right-hand corner of the icon. You double-click, and then it shows a list of all the other references on all the other worksheets. Let me cancel this and show you what else we can do with these precedent arrows. I've clicked Trace Precedence once, and I see all of the cells that are directly referenced in this formula. But if you think about it, those cells all have precedence as well. So if I click Trace Precedence again, I'll see a few more cells that roll into this calculation. Trace Precedence again, and again, and again, and again, and soon I realize that this is so complicated, it's probably something I don't want to touch. To get rid of these arrows, click Remove Arrows. The opposite feature is called Trace Dependence. Choose cell F4. Let's see where this cell is used. Click Trace Dependence in the ribbon, and Excel will show that there's only one formula that directly references F4. But if you click Trace Dependence again, that cell, the cell in H4, is used in two other cells. Click again, and again, and again, and again, and you realize that this one cell is actually making its way through the whole worksheet. Great way to get a visual map of how the worksheet is working. Let me click Remove Arrows to get rid of those. Now there are a couple of new features here in Formula Auditing that were brand new in Excel 2003, so depending on what you upgraded from, you may never have seen these. As a matter of fact, even if you were in Excel 2003, you probably never saw them because, again, they were buried so deep. Another interesting thing on the ribbon is if Microsoft thinks something is really cool and really important, they give it a really big button, like the watch window. Let's take a look at the Evaluate formula. This is one of the new features from Excel 2003. The way that this works is select a cell, so I'll select cell D32, and click Evaluate Formula. Now Excel shows us our formula, and you'll see that E30 is underlined. That means that is the piece that Excel would calculate first. Now we have two choices here. We can either click Evaluate, which will immediately tell us what E30 is, Or we can click Step In. When you click Step In, you get to see the calculation that's used in E30. So E30 is E28 plus E29. I could step in again, but let's evaluate at this point. Evaluate. E28 is that number. E29 is that number. And now Excel is about to do that subtraction. We'll click Evaluate, and we get down to the final answer. Now at this point, we need to step out, which will take that result back up and replace E30 with the actual number. This is a great way to watch your formulas calculate in slow motion. It's perfect when you have a formula that you are absolutely convinced is calculating wrong. Go into Evaluate Formula mode, and you'll understand that it was probably an order of operations or a missing parentheses that's causing the problem. I'll click Evaluate, 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 and we can go right through the formula and watch the whole formula get calculated in slow motion. This is a cool new feature. I'll click Close. An interesting thing about the ribbon is that if Microsoft thinks that a feature is particularly useful, we get a big icon instead of a little icon. And you'll notice the watch window is the only button in formula auditing that gets the large icon. They really want you to see this new feature. Now, if you're a VBA programmer writing macros in Excel, you've had a watch window for the last 15 years, and you'll have to admit it's one of the very useful tools for debugging. It's even more useful in Excel. The place where the watch window comes in handy is if you have a workbook with a summary on the top worksheet and many work papers going back. You're working back on the work paper sheet, but you constantly have to go back to the summary to see the impact on the total. Rather than having to switch back and forth from one sheet to the next, you can set up a watch window that will show you selected cells on many sheets. Click the watch window to get started. When you click the Add Watch button, Excel asks you to point to the cell that you're interested in watching. Maybe you're interested in that card payment back on the Discovering page. Click Add, and Excel adds it to the list. There's room there for several different cells. You can even watch a cell on the current sheet. Now, the great thing about the watch window is it always shows you the current value of all of those cells. If the cell has a formula, you'll see the formula in the right-hand column. The watch window stays there no matter what worksheet you go to. If I go back to the Discovering worksheet, I still see the exact same watch window. If the watch window gets in your way, you're free to move it. Another very cool thing about the watch window is it acts as a go-to feature. If you want to go to a particular cell, just double-click the cell, and Excel will immediately jump there, even if it's on another worksheet. The watch window is a feature that they added to Excel 2003. Once you start using the watch window, it'll become a permanent fixture in your Excel screen. Well, it's such a great feature that you want to keep forever, but I'm going to close it so we can move on. Let's go on to the next worksheet. Now, here's a situation where Excel corrected a problem that has been plaguing us forever. And since it's corrected, it's really hard for you to see just how bad the problem was. So I'm going to ask for you to sit back as we go back into the Wayback Machine and take a look at this problem in Excel 93. I'll Alt-Tab. Okay, so we have a spreadsheet here in Excel 2003, and up in row 1, we have a really important number, your new quota for next week. Of course, you'd like to figure out how that number is calculated. Move up, select the cell, and see the formula in the formula bar. Well, that's great. I can see the formula, but now I forget what my quota was. I can't see both the number and the formula at the same time. To see the number, I have to move down out of the cell, and now I can't see the formula. To see the formula, I move back up, and now I can't see the number. It was maddening. Certainly, if you've been using Excel for a while, you've run into this situation. Well, hey, let's go back to Excel 2007 and see how they've handled it now. Here I have a very long formula, but Excel is smart enough to say, well, wait a second, we don't want to hijack your grid. We're going to keep the formula on just a single line. There's 3 new controls on the right side of the formula bar. The first control will let you scroll through the formula 1 row at a time. Now that's a little annoying because I'd like to be able to see the whole formula at once, so hit the Expand Formula Bar button. And now Excel expands the formula bar, but it does so by moving the grid down. What a brilliant new feature in Excel. A very simple solution to what was a very, very annoying problem in previous versions. Let's move on to the next worksheet. I have to tell you that last formula that we used, that long formula, I had to work pretty hard to come up with a formula that was that long. At this point now, for the rest of the day, we're going to be using short formulas, I promise. Let's go ahead and collapse the formula bar back to its original size. We have a simple spreadsheet here, product, quantity, revenue, and we want to calculate average price. Now, this is an easy formula. I'm sure everyone could do it. Click in cell D2. Okay, so I want to take a little survey right now. every time I do one of my Power Excel seminars, I take a survey, and this survey kind of tells me when you started using computers. So we're going to do that survey right now. There's 3 different ways to enter this formula. I want you to take a look at the 3 ways. One way to enter the formula for average price is just to type it. Type equals C2 divided by B2. That's the typing method. The other way to enter this formula is the mouse method. On the keyboard, you hit the equal sign, grab your mouse, click on C2, go back to the keyboard, hit the divide key, and then click on B2. The other method is the keyboard method. Now, this method, if anyone raises their hand for this method, I know that you started using spreadsheets back in the days of Lotus 123. In the keyboard method, I can move the mouse out of the way. I'll never touch the mouse. I type the equal sign, and then I'm going to hit the left arrow key to select cell C2. When I type the operator, in this case the divide, the focus will jump back to D2, and I want to point to B2. So I'll hit the arrow key twice, and without typing any cell references at all, and without using the mouse, I create the exact same formula. So quick survey. If you type most of your formulas, raise your hand. If you're a mouse method person, raise your hand. If you usually use the Lotus arrow keys method, raise your hand. Now, look around. All the people in the other cubes are wondering why you're raising your hand. But anyway, usually it's about split, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And I have to tell you, if you're the Lotus arrow key method person, you and I are in the same club. It is so much faster to use the arrow keys than any other method. Now, I know old habits die hard. You're free to use whatever method you want to use to enter these formulas. Grab your mouse or your keyboard and enter the formula equals C2 divided by B2 in cell D2. Next, we want to copy this formula down to all the rows in our current region. Again, you can do that however you'd like. You can use Control-C and Control-V to paste. You can grab the fill handle and drag it down. Or my favorite method, just double-click the fill handle, and Excel will copy the formula down to the right number of rows. Fantastic. Oh, wait, no, it's not fantastic. All of a sudden, we have a couple of error cells. What's up with that? This is the division by 0 error. Excel is saying, mathematically, there is no answer when you divide 0 by 0, so I'm going to give you this big, ugly error. I'm sure that the mathematicians approve of that. However, it's very annoying for us. Now, in previous versions of Excel, we would usually resort to writing if statements in order to solve this problem. I'll hit page down to go to another example of this range. Now, here I've already entered the formula for you. And what we would normally do in Excel 2003 is select the first cell, press F2 to edit the cell, and then wrap that formula in an if function. Type if, the open parenthesis, B31 equals 0, put a comma for then. Now we have to put the value if it's true. We can either put 0, which I realize drives all the math people crazy, or in quotes you can say not valid, or you can just put 2 quotes so you get nothing. And then a comma, this is the value if it's false. If B31 is not 0, then of course we want Excel to do the division for us. I'll type the end key to move out to the end of the formula, type the right parenthesis, and now when I copy this formula down, all my div by 0 errors are corrected. Now, certainly you've written a formula like this once or twice. There's 6 new functions in Excel 2007, and one of those functions is the new if error function. We'll hit page down to go to another view of this spreadsheet. Okay, the if error function is a brand new function. Let's press F2 to edit, and I'll show you how the if error function works. After the equal sign, type the word if, and then error, and an open parenthesis. Now, in if error, the very first thing you do is put your calculation, the calculation that's going to work 99.9% of the time. Type the end key to move to the end of the formula, type a comma, and now type the value that you want to appear if there's an error. I'll put 2 quotes and close the function. There are several advantages of if error. First of all, it handles any kind of error you could ever get, whether it's an NA error, a value error, a reference error, a div by 0 error. Second, particularly if you were using VLOOKUPs, there would be times where the formula to handle an error in a VLOOKUP was a big, long monster formula that actually performed the VLOOKUP twice, which is kind of crazy because 99% of the time the VLOOKUP works and Excel could stop there. It's just the 1% of the time where it has to go out and do something else. Well, now, in the if error function, the first thing that Excel does is calculate your formula. If that formula comes out to a number without generating an error, Excel can stop and it doesn't have to go on to the second argument at all. It's only in the rare case where you have a problem that Excel has to do additional processing. I'll choose Control-Enter to accept that formula, double-click to copy it down. Now let's go back up to the top of the spreadsheet with Control-Home. If you're not really worried about the errors, you understand why they're there, and it really doesn't matter to you, but you don't want them to print, there is one setting that will help you out. Let's go to the Page Layout tab. We need to look at the whole Page Setup dialog box, so we're going to click the More button in the lower right-hand corner of the Page Setup group. Go to the Sheet tab. There's a setting here on the Sheet tab in the Print group for cell errors as, initially it says displayed, but you can change it to be either blank, a pair of dashes, or number NA. Blank is probably what you want. Click OK. Now when you print this document, even though we see the division by zero errors, they won't print in the final printout. Let's go on to the next worksheet. Excel's forte is doing calculations with numbers. I'm sure that if you work in Excel all day, you're calculating numbers all of the time. However, Excel is really good at doing text calculations as well. Now, a long time ago, in one of my last day jobs, this actually happened. Someone came back from a trade show and they had 5,000 names of data, first name in column A and last name in column B. And the lady was trying to get everything together into a single column. She wasn't sure how to do that, so her approach was to click in the new column and just start typing. She had gotten through several hundred names when someone came up to her and said, "Well, what are you doing?" She said, "I need to get these together into a single column." That person didn't know how to do it, but they said, "Hey, well, call Bill upstairs. He probably has a solution for this." And sure enough, I came down, showed her how to build a formula that will add 2 bits of text. Now, instead of a plus sign, that's what we'd use for numbers, we have to use an ampersand. I'm not sure how you're supposed to figure this out. If you went to Excel Help, you would have to know to look for the word concatenation. Concatenation, that's not a word that anyone ever uses in normal conversation. I don't know how you would ever find that in Excel Help. Now, to do concatenation, we'll type the equal sign, click on A2, press Shift-7 for the ampersand, and then click on B2. I'll hit Control-Enter to accept that formula, double-click the fill handle, and the whole thing was done. Now, no offense to you if you're in marketing, but this particular woman in marketing was fairly selective, and she didn't think that this was a good solution. I'm sure you can spot the problem right away. She said, "Hey, you jam the first name and last name together. It doesn't make any sense." I said, "That's okay. We can solve that problem." I'm going to click into the formula bar this time. I want to take the value in A2, the ampersand, and this time join it together with a space. But I can't just put a space there. I have to put it in quotes. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key to hit the quote, let go of the Shift key to type a space, Shift key to hit a quote, and then another ampersand. There's my formula. A2, ampersand, quote, space, quote, ampersand B2. Now I want to put this formula in all of the cells of the current selection, and Control-Enter is the shortcut key to do that. Control-Enter puts that cell in, and the spaces are there. Having an IT background, I thought that she should have been very happy at this point, but not completely understanding marketing people yet, I didn't realize that she wasn't happy. She said, "Well, hey, now it looks like you're screaming the name. It's in all caps. I was typing it in upper and lower case." Well, remember, there's over 350 functions in Excel, including the function built for this very purpose. It's called the proper function. I'm going to go back to my formula bar, click after the equal sign, type proper, and the open parentheses. I'll hit the end key to go to the end of the formula, type the closing parentheses, and again, I want to put this all the way down the worksheet, so Control-Enter. It's very nearly perfect. If you look down in row 15, Marion O'Reilly, it got the R right. The one place where it tends to fall down is in row 11, Joan McCartney. It doesn't get the second C correct. I don't know any better way to handle that. Hey, but if you do, pick up the phone right now and give me a call. You know, when I'm out doing this seminar live in front of a room full of 100 accountants, I've never done the seminar once where someone, and for some reason they're always in row 2, doesn't raise their hand and say, "Hey, Bill, there's a better way to do that." It happens all the time. With 400 million people using Microsoft Excel, many of those people using it 40 to 60 hours a week, undoubtedly someone stumbles upon something new. Now, I don't know why it is that they're always in row 2. I think they come in knowing that they're smarter than I am, and they don't want to sit in row 1 where possibly I could reach out and hit them. It always happens that someone in row 2 shows me up in every seminar. I love that. My last book, Learn Excel from Mr. Excel, has 277 questions that came in during seminars, and I'm scheduled to rewrite that book soon. I always appreciate when someone gives me some new information and I learn something at my own seminars. Well, hey, let's move on. I have to warn you that there's one strange thing that happens with concatenation, and this was not part of the marketing lady's problem, but I added it in today just to show you what would happen. We're able to successfully join column A and column B, and we have a date of birth in column C. I'm going to edit my formula, use an ampersand, and in quotes, put something like "was born on," close the quotes, an ampersand, and click on C2. I expect to find out that Yvonne was born on January 18th, 1958, but when I hit Control-Enter, I'm surprised to see that she was born on 21/2/03. What is 21/2/03? Well, it turns out that that's the number of days since January 1st, 1900 on a Windows PC, or since January 1st, 1904 on a Mac. While that's fascinating information, if you're Cliff Clavin, I've never ever had a manager call me up and say, hey, how many days after January 1st, 1900 was that receivable due? It never ever comes up. Well, if you need to join text with the date, we have another function at our disposal called the text function. I'm going to click into my formula bar right before the C2 and type the text function. I need to move to the end of the formula, so I'll hit the N key, type a comma, and here, in quotes, I need to put the special custom number formatting codes that I would use to format the cell. I can probably guess that mm/dd/YYYY would work. Now, if you sit around memorizing custom number formatting codes, well, I feel sorry for you. But you could build very complex codes here. For example, 4 Ds, a comma, 4 Ms, a space, a D, a comma, and then the YYYY will actually spell out the day and the month. What does that say about me if I've sat around memorizing the custom numeric formatting codes? Okay, let's jump back to my marketing lady. Remember, she had 5,000 rows of this data, and she had spent an hour typing, and I walk in and show her how to solve this problem. She has 2 reactions. The first reaction is she's upset that she wasted the hour typing all those names, but relieved that she's not going to be typing names for the next 3 hours. Well, I start walking towards the door of the marketing department, whistling a little tune, the tune that's, I just saved this lady 3 days worth of work, and all of a sudden from behind me, I hear a scream. Spun around on my heels, and I walked back. Well, the lady in marketing, who admittedly was new to Excel, said, I'm so happy with the data that I have in column D, I no longer need this data in columns A, B, and C. So therefore, I can delete it. And everything is gone. Oh, she's mad. Well, there's a t-shirt we sell at Mr. Excel that was born this day. It's called Step Away from the Keyboard. Of course, I hit Control-Z to undo. Everything comes back, and she starts breathing again. Well, what do we have to do here in column D to change those live formulas to values? Depending on how long you've used spreadsheets, your answer was either paste special values, or if you go back to the days of Lotus, you just said /range value. Or if you just started using Excel yesterday, you might have answered paste values. I don't know why they change the name of this every 10 years, but they do. Here's how we solve the problem. Select our formulas. I'll hold down the Shift key and down to select my entire range of data. Now I want to copy. I'll go to the Home ribbon. There's at least a half dozen different ways to copy. You use your favorite method. You can use the copy button on the Home ribbon. You can use Control-C. You can right-click and copy. I'm sure there's more. Control-C to copy. And now we need to paste these values right back on top of themselves, but as values. The new easy way to do this is to open the drop-down underneath the Paste button. You'll see that the button is actually 2 buttons. The top button is Paste, but the lower half of the button is a drop-down. In there, we now have an entry for paste values. Choose Paste Values, and you'll see in the formula bar that instead of a live formula, we now have the value. At this point, we'd be free to delete columns A, B, and C. I mentioned to you that every time I do my Power Excel seminar, someone shows me a brand new trick. It was just a couple of months ago that someone raised their hand at this point and showed me a trick that was so obscure, and I can't figure out how he ever figured it out. Now, my family is not a big Excel user, but when I got off the plane and we were having dinner, they said, hey, how was your seminar? I said, you won't believe this amazing new trick that I learned. And they just looked at me with this blank stare on their face. So I'm going to share it with you, and you tell me if it's not the most amazing thing you've ever seen. I'm going to hit Control-Z to bring back my formulas. I'll hit Escape to get out of the copy mode. So I've selected the formulas here, and I want to change these to values. It had to be the strangest combination of accidental clicking the mouse in order to figure this out. But watch, I love it. Go to the right edge of this selection. Right-click, drag to the right, drag to the left, let go, and a brand new menu pops up with Copy Here as Values Only. Did you get that? Let me try it again. We're going to go to the right edge of the selection, right-click, go right, go left, let go, Copy Here as Values Only. I love it. It's so obscure. I'm not sure that it's any better than any of the other ways. It's just so cool knowing something that none of the other 400 million people, well, okay, now you know it, and I know it. So there's this very small club. Anyway, it's a great trick. That's the kind of tricks that I learn when I go out and do my Power Excel seminar. Hey, feel free to drop me an email if you see something where you say, hey, there's a better way to do that. You can get 15 minutes of fame when I borrow your trick and put it in my next book. All right, let's move on. In that last example, we used paste values which is really one particular option in the Pay Special dialog box. Let's take a look at the Pay Special dialog box just to see what things you can do. Now, I mentioned I do this seminar around the country, and I showed this trick once to a room full of auditors. And with the new Sarbanes-Oxley compliance issues, the auditors really hated this trick. So I'm going to ask, if you're responsible for Sarbanes-Oxley in your company, please just move on to the next topic. Okay, now let me show you this really cool trick. Let's say that your manager says, hey, we need to readjust the prices this year. We want to increase everything by 2%. Well, I agree the right way to do this is to go to column C and create a new formula that's 1.02 times column B. But if you're really confident in what you're doing, there's a quick way to do it. Let's just go to a blank cell, perhaps cell E1, and type 1.02. I'll hit Control-Enter to stay in that cell, and now Control-C to copy. I want to select my range of prices, so I'll click in B2, hold down the Shift key and down arrow, so I've selected all the prices. Now let's go to the Paste drop-down and choose Pay Special. In the Pay Special dialog box, there's a couple of things we're going to do. The first thing to do is in the Operations section, click Multiply. That'll multiply whatever's on the clipboard, in this case 1.02, times all the numbers in our selection. To make sure that we don't change the formatting in column B, you would also want to click Values. Click OK. Now you'll notice that the first price is $6.14. After I click OK, everything has automatically been adjusted by 2%. In Pay Special, we also have options for divide, add, subtract. So if we wanted to add $1 to every price, go to a blank cell, type a 1, Control-Enter to put the value in the cell, Control-C to copy, select your prices, and we'll go back to the Pay Special, and this time say that we want to add. So whatever's on the clipboard, in this case a 1, we'll add to the prices, choose values, and click OK. Everything just increased by $1. Great ways to do calculations without doing formulas at all. Now you understand why the auditors cringe with this one is because we have no audit trail whatsoever. Once I delete those values in E1 and F3, we'll have no recollection of what the old prices were or what formula we did to get to the new prices. Let's move on. Now at the beginning of this topic, I invited all of the auditors to move on, and I know that you all stayed just to watch. If that's the case, please send your hate mail to... No. Okay, let's move on. Here we are on the parse worksheet. I showed you how to join text together. Sometimes we have the opposite problem where we need to take the first name and last name that's in column A and break it into 2 columns. Very easy to do using the text to columns feature, but I need to make room for that text. And if I was absolutely sure that it was only first name and last name, all I would have to do is insert a new column B. But I've learned through experience that you can never be sure of that. So I'm going to select several columns B, C, and D, and use Insert Sheet Columns. This will give me plenty of room in case someone has 3 or 4 names in column A. I want to select the names in column A, so I'll click in A2 down to A23. We're going to go to the Data tab of the ribbon and use the Text to Columns icon. Now there's 2 different ways to use text to columns. The first way is delimited. That's where every item is separated by a specific character, like in this example, a space. The other version is fixed width. This is if you're getting data from an old COBOL system where the programmers would actually map out that a particular field starts in position 82. Delimited is the right choice here, so we'll click Next to go to Step 2. In Step 2, we have to specify what our delimiter is. By default, it always says a tab. In this case, we'll use space. One time I received a data set where the delimiter was the vertical bar character. No matter what delimiter someone sends, you can actually click the other field and type the delimiter in there. We'll click Next to go on to Step 3. Now here's where we specify our data types. The only time I ever want you to change anything here is if you have a date in either month, day, year, or year, month, day format. A lot of people are tempted to choose text because after all, these names are text. However, when you choose text in this dialog box, there's a horrible gotcha. The range that's created will have a special text format applied, and you will never be able to enter a formula in that range again. The one time it's appropriate to use text is if there's leading spaces and you need to keep the leading spaces, you would use text. But that's it. Okay, here we can choose what our destination is. If we wanted to, we could go to B2, but I'm going to go right to A2 to overwrite my original names, and we'll click Finish. Very quickly, Excel breaks everything out by word at every space. In a perfect world, we have first name in column A and last name in column B, but things are never perfect. We need to go take a look in column C and D and see if there's any stray information there. Now, it's easy to see on this screen, but in reality, you'd have 5,000 or 50,000 names, and the solution is to go to C1, press the N key, and then the down arrow key. Excel will jump to the next row that has a value. So here we have Bobby Joe Dupree. That's probably a matter of Bobby Joe is the first name. Then we can cut Dupree from column C back to column B. Mary Ellen Jones, again, Mary Ellen in column A, Jones from C back to B. You would basically just keep going back to column C, hitting N down until Excel takes you to the very last row. Then you know that there's no other problems in column C. One other gotcha that you should know about when you use data text to columns. In this particular case, we had our delimiter as a spacebar. Sometimes your delimiter might be a tab. Sometimes your delimiter might be a comma. Let's say that you take data from somewhere else outside of Excel, either Notepad or an email or a website. Copy that data in the other application and paste it to Excel. Normally, each row will be pasted into a single cell. However, for the rest of the day, actually until you close Excel, after using data text to columns, Excel will automatically parse anything from the clipboard that gets pasted into Excel. If I had a paragraph in Notepad and I copied it and pasted it into Excel, I would all of a sudden see the word shooting across the columns, which of course is not behavior that happens on any other day. This was driving me crazy a couple of times until finally I realized it only happened on the days where I'd used text to columns in the morning, and then it happened for the rest of the day. Okay, let's move on. Look at all those green note flags in this worksheet. Green note flags. Those appear in the upper left-hand corner of a cell when Microsoft sees something that they think is a problem. Well, sure enough, although these look like numbers, all of these are actually text stored as numbers. If we click the little yield sign, it'll tell us that it's a number stored as text, and we could choose to convert to number, although that would be very, very tedious to go through and do this over and over and over again. Hard to say exactly how this happened. One way is someone used data text to columns and used the text option in step 3. Another way is they wanted the numbers to be as text and they typed an apostrophe before each number, although looking in the formula bar, it doesn't appear that like that's what happened this time. These are slightly maddening because if you specifically reference the cell, let me say equal 2 times A1, it gives me an answer. And it appears that it really doesn't matter that it's text. But if I come down below and use the auto sum, Alt equals is the fast way to do that, it has no clue what to sum. And if I specifically say sum these values, it gets a 0. Now it's really dangerous. Imagine if you had 50,000 rows of numbers and somewhere buried in the middle were a couple of text entries, you're going to have the wrong total. Well, Excel experts argue over the best way to solve this problem. I'm going to show you 2 different methods, and you can use whichever method you find easiest. I'm going to delete my total here and come up to a blank cell in cell E1. And I can either type the number 1 or the number 0. Let me type the number 1. Control-Enter to accept the 1, Control-C to copy to the clipboard, and then I'll select all of my values. I'm going to go to the Home ribbon and choose Paste, Paste Special, and again, multiply all of those text values by the number 1 on the clipboard. Choose Values at the top, click OK, and strangely enough, when you multiply a 1 by text that looks like a number, Excel solves the problem. Let me show you that it's working. If I go down to cell A25 and use Alt equals again, Excel now recognizes these as numbers and my formula works. No, it doesn't. See, this is why I hate that text function. Those cells in A1 to A24 were formatted as text, and then because I did something in A25, the text function got copied down to A25. You can see it up in the number group of the Home ribbon that this cell somehow became text. Now, if I change it back to number, it doesn't immediately fix my formula. I basically have to go back and start over. I'm going to hit the delete key to get rid of that formula, and now try Alt equals again. Make sure that it says number up in the drop-down, and Control-Enter, and now I finally have the total. This is another reason not to use that text option in step 3 of text to columns. Those cells that are marked as values will just start spreading throughout your worksheet. The one last annoying problem here is that all of those numbers, because they were formerly text and are now numbers, are glued to the left side of the column. Select those cells, and you can use right align to move them back to where they need to be. Okay, so that's method number 1. I entered in a 1 in an out-of-the-way cell, copied, and then used Paste Special, multiply. Some people will put a 0 in E1, and then we'll use Paste, Paste Special, add it does the same thing. Again, one of the readers from my website wrote in and said, hey, you keep recommending this particular trick, and there's a much faster way to do it. And I have to admit, they're right. Hit page down, and we'll have an identical copy of the original data set. Select this range that contains text that looks like numbers. We're going to go to the Data tab, choose Text to Columns, and completely ignore everything else. Just click Finish. That's 3 clicks to completely solve the problem. Okay, let's move on.